You're welcome to the Bureau's online training. They will be doing the off-the-shoulder bustier blouse and off-shoulder sleeves. Okay, so you're going to get your, on the mannequin there, on the mannequin, you're going to be measuring, we'll need the upper bust circumference. You're going to measure around the upper bust like this. You measure around it, making sure that the tape goes under your armpits like that. Then you measure the round arm circumference. That is, with your hands here, you're going to measure across the shoulders and across the arm. Okay, so that measurement is needed for the off-shoulder sleeve. Okay, so the round arm circumference for this tutorial is 41, then the upper bust circumference is 34. When we get the difference, it gives us 7. So 7 inches will be used in cutting this off the shoulder circumference here, the off sleeve circumference. And then I'll begin my measurement, vertical measurement, from 4 inches. That's the standard. You begin from 4 inches like this. But you can, if you want your neckline to be lower, you can bring it down to 5 or so, but you begin from 4 and then you get your vertical measurement. Okay, so let's move on to the fabric now to cut in the freehand. So now I'm beginning my vertical measurements from 4. Your tape rule will be placed against the fabric at 0.4. Okay, so the shoulder circumference, the shoulder to bust is 10.5. You mark 10.5. On to under bust 14. Now shoulder to bust is 10, but you add half inch for the, to the seam length, to the length. Shoulder to under bust is 14. You add half inch for the, allowance on the length, and then shoulder to waist is 17. You add half, that's 17 and a half. Shoulder to the hemline, that's the hip, is 24. Then you add 2 inches seam allowance because we want to use the fabric in turning the lining. We'll use the lining in turning up the fabric rather, like this. So now we're going to get our bust span on the circumference. Bust span simply means nipple to nipple or bust to bust. So for this dress, for this blouse, the bust span is 8 inches. You divide 8 by 2, give you 4. So now you are going to add half inch that allowance to the 4. That's 4.5 on the bust, 4.5 on the under bust, 4.5 on the waist, and then 4.5 on the hemline, like this. So you're going to connect the points up to the upper bust. You mark the 4.5 there too. Okay, now the armhole circumference on the normal basic bodice, you divide it by 2. For this measurement is 17. 17 divided by 2 is 8.5. You mark that straight up. Remember, your point still begins at 4, but we are going to be using the illusion of the shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, and the vertical measurements. But you put 4 against the fabric, like that. So now we want to work with our shoulder, the upper bust area. Now my neck width here is 13 inches. The neck width, 13 divided by 2 will give me 6.5. 6.5. So because of the bustier effect, the bustier effect will be taking away about 1.5 inches here. So you're going to multiply 1.5 by 2, that gives me 3. So you're going to be adding 3 inches here, like this. You will understand why this is so. So now, on the upper bust, you mark 1.5 inches away from the dart here, and you also mark 1.5 inches away from the dart, both left and right. You mark it like that. Okay, now you come to the bust area. You mark 1 inch up like this, and then 1 inch down like this. You will soon find out why. It's going to help you to be able to get a proper curve. So now you come to the under bust. You mark 1.5 inches to the left. We're working with the dart line now, and then you mark 1.5 inches to the right. Just mark it like this. So you're going to mark that to the hemline. 1.5 inches up, 1.5 inches left and right. So you connect with the ruler. Connecting the hemline upwards to the under bust. Now you're going to now connect the under bust to the bust area. Remember that we have marked 1 inch below the bust, 1 inch above the bust. So you'll be connecting the under bust to that 1 inch that we marked. Like this. Like this. So you come to the upper bust too. You connect it to that 1 inch we marked above the bust. Like this. And like this. So now you're going to now create a curve. See, this is really going to make your project very curvy, like that. So now we want to get our circumference measurements. The bust circumference is 38. 38 divided by 4 is 9.5, like that. Then you mark 2 inches seam allowance, like this. On the under bust, we have, on the under bust is 32. 32 divided by 4 is 8. You mark 8 inches, and then you add 4 inches seam allowance. I prefer to have more allowances there. How did I get 4 inches? You know, we have 2 inches as our standard allowance, and then because of the bustier that will be subtracted, just add that 2 inches. You know, you add 2 inches more to the circumference allowance. Okay, now the waist circumference is 34. 34 divided by 2 is 8.5 plus 4 inches seam allowance. Then the hip is 39. 39 divided by 4 is 9 3/4. That's 9.75 plus 4 inches seam allowance. So I'm going to connect the points together. Connect the points together like this. Now look at the hemline. I don't want it to be straight, so I'm going to mark 2 inches above the hemline, and then I'll be creating the curve there. Creating the curve there. So you come to the armhole, yeah. So I'm going to be connecting. It's just draw a slant from that place to the neck area. That's the upper bust area, like this. Okay, and then I want, okay, I'm going to cut now. I'm going to cut now. So you can see now I've cut out the bustier effect like this. For the, this is the front block. So the bust, you can see the neckline is not straight. There's a bend here, there's a curve there. So I want to create that curve on the pattern. So I'm going to be marking 1 inch at the center of the neck, 1 inch down, like this. And then you're going to connect it to the side. So you cut that out. And then this is what you have, like this. This and this. So we're going to cut our lining the same way, and then we'll cut the back too, the back block now. So now this is the back block. I've marked 2 inches for my zipper allowance, and then the same length for the front is what you get for the back. That is, you place your measurement from your tape rule from 4 inches on the fabric. Like this, you get all your vertical measurements. So for the busts, for the neckline, remember you're going to do your 13 inches, that's divided by 2, that's 6.5, and then you just add ½ inch for the sewing. Then the bust area, you just put everything you did on the front block, you put the measurement here, then you add just 2 inches seam allowance on every circumference measurement. So all your measurements will begin from the edge of the zipper line. That's where you begin your circumference measurements from. So once you're done, you can connect your points like this. Connect your point like this. And then you create your armhole slant from there upward. Like this. So for the darts, you can also use your bust span, that is 4.5 inches, like we did for the front. So you mark your 4.5 inches like this, and then the length of the darts, okay, you focus on the waist area, the waist. The length of the dart will be 5 inches upward and 4 inches downward from the waist. So 5 inches upward like this. We're going to have normal darts at the back, and then 4 inches downward from the waist. You may decide to take your dart all through the back, through the length to the hem, but sometimes we just want to do it from this point to this point. So you mark your bust span 4.5. You mark your bust span here 4.5. We're going to connect that together, and then you create your darts. You mark ½ inch away from the dart line and ½ inch from the dart line. That's on the waist, and then you connect the dart like that. Connect it like this. You connect like this. This is what you're going to sew. So now I'm going to cut out the back. So now you mark 2 inches upward from the hem line, and then you create the curve to the hem line. Then for the depth of the neck, you can just put 1 inch like we did for the front, and then you create that curve to the neckline. So you cut off that, then you cut off the one at the base. So now I'm going to cut my lining for the back now. So now we want to cut our sleeve. The sleeve length, from here down is just 8 inches. The circumference is 11 inches, and then remember that the off sleeve circumference here is 7 inches. Okay, so we'll do that on the fabric, and then whatever you have on the bodice here must correspond with the armhole slant of the sleeve. Okay, now I've folded my fabric for the sleeve. So look here, the sleeve length here is 8 inches plus 1.5 inches seam allowance. You use ½ inch to turn your lining at the top, and then 1 inch will be used in turning up. You turn up with the lining at the hem line, at the sleeve circumference. So that is what we have, 9.5 inches. And then the sleeve circumference is 11 inches. You divide that by 2, that gives you 5.5. Okay, 5.5. Now 5.5, you add 1 inch seam allowance like this, 1 inch seam allowance. And then look at the off sleeve circumference here. The off sleeve is 7 inches. So you're going to mark 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. Then you add ½ inch for the seam allowance. Cut our sleeve. The sleeve length, from here down is just 8 inches. The circumference is 11 inches. And then remember that the off sleeve circumference here is 7 inches. Okay, so we'll do that on the fabric. Okay, now you can see that we've marked that. So from the off sleeve here, I'm going to be placing my back bodice, that way, like this. And then I'll be marking that point upward. And then you just connect this point here, like this. So we have the shape for our off sleeve. So I'm going to cut that out. So by the time we're done sewing, this is how they're going to be placed, like this. So I'm going to cut my lining and then sew. So for the lining, I've cut out the exact shape and the length of the bodice here. So you're going to be reducing that lining by 1 inch. You're going to be reducing by 1 inch because we want to use the lining to turn up the fabric. So you reduce by 1 inch. So I want to sew now. I'm going to be sewing the fabric, the side to the center and then side to the center. For the lining, you're going to iron the felt, that's the wadding. You iron it to the wrong side of your lining, like this. So you'll be sewing fabric side to center, side to center. So I'm going to show you what next. So now I've sewn the lining together and the fabric. So what you're going to do now is to first sew the hem line. You sew the hem line with ½ inch. So once you're done, you're going to turn up with ½ inch and then you sew the sides like this. Once you're done sewing the sides, you sew the neckline with ½ inch too. Then you notch the neckline and then you turn it out from the armpits, that's the armhole. You turn out your fabric. So now turned out, this is what we get. So you can see that the more allowance you deduct from the under bust and the upper bust, the more shapy and curvier your bustier will be. So we'll do the back block and I'll come back. For the back block, I've joined my lining with ½ inch and then you turn it up and then you sew it at the neckline. Okay, so now you put paper stay. I did two layers of paper stay. I gummed it to the hem line and also to the neckline, the seam. So you're going to iron and then you turn out at the armhole. You turn it out. So I've sewn my zipper into the back block. So you're going to be placing the front against the back and then you sew the side. You fix your side, you sew the measurement. For the sleeve, you're going to sew the lining to the fabric with ½ inch and then you turn it up like this. Then at the top you sew ½ inch, then at the edge you sew ½ inch like that. So you're going to add paper stay, double layers on the circumference and the off sleeve circumference. Okay, so you turn it out like this. You turn it out like this, and then you're going to iron your sleeve. So whatever we have, after ironing, we'll fold like this and get our sleeve circumference. So I've joined the sleeves together. So now we're going to be sewing the sleeve to the armhole of the bodice.